title did I give this? Who, what, why? What do you think I meant by that?
Exact opposite of what you said this morning.
So who is this? Who is that? We could go do it the other way around, but it seems that those three kinds of questions, not only are they different just by their definition, but it's different for each person. So you may need to look at it from, you may need to start out with the who question. Who is having this emotion? You may need to go directly to the identity rather than go into the why, or you may start with why. So there's no, even though I set it up in the first talk as why and what and who, you may need to go into just what is this? What is anything that's happening? What is it? And don't settle. Don't settle for the first response or the first idea or don't. When I'm saying don't settle, also, you don't have to be real demanding about it, but you can just like if you're looking out into the woods, you're looking out the window, or if you're looking at the wall, I'm sure you've noticed it. Nothing lasts. Clouds come and go. They show up as being very strong and concrete and very believable. And then pretty soon we notice that all that's kind of faded away. Basic teaching of the Buddha is impermanence. Nothing, all compounded things will vanish. Body, speech, mind, earth, water, fire, air, all the elements, this very body that we are so attached to and we protect and we advance and we feed and so on is impermanent. And you can, from the time someone's born, you can watch them slowly come up. And if you were to watch the whole thing, we've been watching ourselves in the mirror. I've certainly been watching myself in the mirror. I've just really been fascinated by mirrors. How about you guys? Any interest? In 1958, I had a lot of hair. Now, put it down like that. You guys probably didn't do that. My vanity was very powerful, very strong. But I was so aware of my vanity that I tried to cover it up and act like I wasn't vain. You guys ever had that problem? Or is that maybe not even a problem? You can't awaken without confusion. The Buddha, as it is talked about, awoke to the confusion. He didn't awaken to some fancy God realm where everything was wonderful and everyone was blissed out and happy and peaceful and supporting each other and very kind and very generous. He awoke to the very confusion that was in his mind. So he awoke to that and at the same time awoke to the confusion in the world. Dependently risen. And that was his awakening, to actually see the chaos. Sounds kind of confusing. So it seems to be necessary for each person here or wherever to get to know yourself. And that might involve a bunch of really difficult crap that you would like to cover up, get rid of, go to the movies, have some dessert, meet with one of your friends that never challenges you about everything, about anything. It always just loves you no matter what you do. I'm sure we all have 2 or 3 dozen of those. So we want to has a highly polished, stylized form of avoidance. Passion is pretty obvious. We go after something. Aggression is pretty obvious. We destroy something, we stop it, we end it and cut its throat. Well, maybe not that, but we end it. And then the avoidance is more subtle. It's just a subtle kind of distraction. It's almost like you're looking at someone that you're used to talking with, could be your mate, could be your daughter, son, grandmother, mother, father. Could be your dog. Could be anything. There's a very subtle way of turning away. Of something else will catch our attention, and so, but we've actually stopped looking at the very situation that was in front of us, which might be your 15-year-old son, might be your 85-year-old mother. It could be some kind of a distraction is about watching that, observing that, seeing that. And how do we do that? We practice sitting down, holding still, train our mind to see more clearly what is coming and what is going, what seems to be static. I'm always ready for questions if you have them. Yes.
When you say get to know yourself, are we talking about getting to know our identity? Or are we talking about getting to know what, like when you're talking about getting startled earlier, whatever the startling is, like what are we getting to know?
I think initially it's going to be about the way we are, what's the fancy word, disingenuous, the way there's self-deception, that we just don't notice it. I'm sure any of you that have been meditating for any length of time, if you sit down and hold still, call it meditation, call it peaches and cream, sit down, hold still, and just receive. Put all the senses, including the mind, on receive as much as you can. Sit down and just receive whatever is happening. If you hold very still without being rigid and everything is on receive, then the very thing that you, any one of you, and this person too, are trying to avoid will start to show up, because you're actually deliberately on receive. You're deliberately going to, as I talk about quite often, you're going to be extremely generous with everything, all of your sense fields, anything that's arising, anywhere, and you're going to be generous by giving everything your attention. I can't think of a more generous thing that anyone can do. Give your attention. Be kind to everything. Just receive anything that's coming your way, any thought, emotion, concept, consequence, conclusion, exclusion, anything that's happening in terms of a relative situation, just observe it. Just watch it move this way, watch it move away. It might wiggle, it might go back and forth, it might get larger, it might get smaller. There's all kinds of qualities that arise around any one thing. Even if it has one name, the qualities that are there are quite a bit different. And sometimes we're angry. The anger is there, and it is anger, but it has a different kind of quality. It's filled with some kind of grasping or passion. It's filled with some kind of ignoring some aspect of that aggression, ignoring turning something away, but keeping something, because that anger is what keeps the self-centeredness going. There's got to be somebody that's upset here. So it might not make any sense, but you can actually welcome even anger without anyone who's angry. It can be done. And there's no credential at the end of it. There's no one who, I was angry, or I get to have a credential because I actually experienced anger with no self. If somebody tells you that, well, I won't say. If you tell yourself that, the claim of no self is self. The claim of, I think I'm getting closer and closer to realization. You probably need to talk to a teacher, maybe not this guy. You could talk to someone, maybe find somebody that's more trustworthy. I'm not very trustworthy. What if I did something that wasn't suitable? What if I started acting in a way that wasn't too agreeable to you? What if it wasn't agreeable to a whole lot of people? Risky. Spiritual path is the true spiritual path, as my teacher, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, talked about at the very end of the Introduction to Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism. He describes a true spiritual path. Anybody have that memorized? I don't either. You have that memorized? Can anybody paraphrase it? I can't. Let's go on to the next thing. Questions? Another question?
Another question, I'm not sure what.
Okay.
Have to do it. Is this idiot compassion?
The energy situation you're talking about? Not necessarily. I mean, they're not going to know what you're talking about. We're just talking about you moving energy. Not necessarily. If it's just that, there's no credential at the other end of it.
Right.
Yeah. Don't say right too quick.
Intention, allowing.
Don't say right too quick.
Allowing.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the question. Yes.
Shoto at the temple has a question.
Is it that really big, tall guy that's getting skinny?
One of them. You said not to settle for the first thing that comes up when asking who. How does Trungpa's first thought, best thought work with that area?
It's just a way of, my understanding of it, just a way of helping people to not elaborate too much. First thought, best thought, even that doesn't work so much, but whatever shows up, you can give it a little bit of attention without jumping into some other elaboration about the first thought. In other words, shutting it down because it's too impulsive, or fluffing it up because it's totally spontaneous. Give it no credential at all. It's just the first thought, the raw, bare attention of just this. I don't think it's something that one can understand right away. I don't think we can kind of get a credential out of it. Finally learned how to do that. First thought, best thought. If you think you've accomplished something there, then you've probably missed the point, or there's some kind of addition onto that situation that creates some kind of a protocol for how you can always be spontaneous. Laura?
I have a general question.
I like those guys.
If one of the vows or precepts is to save all beings, and there are no beings, how does that?
Okay, so that's why it's sometimes said in a different way, be with all things. So, yeah, be with all things. I talk about it in both ways. And be with all things, you can start with your own thought patterns. Sit down and hold still. Whatever arises, it's just arising. And so another way of saying that if you want to save all beings, you can practice on your own thoughts. Just allow them to be what they are, save them. Don't kill them, don't shut down on them. Even if they're have disturbing content, you want to work on compassion, do it here. Just save this being. And how do we do that? Meet this being where they're at. And that's challenging. It's difficult to just be genuine, be who you are, because sometimes it's very embarrassing. We just realize that we aren't going to be able to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps into some kind of magnificent reality of liberation. We aren't going to be some great being better than our stupid ego or our narcissism or our insane pride or our totally useless kind of shame that is based on causes and conditions that are generated by causes and conditions we had no say so about. And yet here we are in the midst of this sad situation. Be with all things. Whatever arises is, it doesn't need your approval. It doesn't need your disapproval. It doesn't need your ignorance, but just don't do anything with it. And the reason that's so challenging is because it's too close to, it's too scary, because it feels like that which is endeavoring to be with all things is in danger of being overcome by evil or lack of control, which is another form of evil. And so it takes great, conventional word, great courage to do that. And how do you do that? Sit down and look at your fear. That's the only way to find courage, to find out, understand what courage is for yourself. There's no one who's courageous. There's just courage. If there's someone who's courageous, it won't last. If there's someone who's awake, I don't care if you've been awake for 3 months now, and I'm wondering if this is how long this is going to last. If there's someone, it's a relative situation, it's going down. Just as it came up relatively, it's going down. So it isn't something else. You don't have to be someone else. You don't have to be an enlightened person. More?
There's a part of a sutra that we chant saying not near, not far. Is there only separate and not separate?
The assumption is it's separate, it's not separate, or it's near, or it's far. And so the way it's working against that is say it's neither near nor far. It's just this. It's the whole idea of distance, the whole idea of past and future, of then and then. And even to say there's just now is not exactly true, not exactly, because if there is a now, then there's a then. And of course, this now, the then in the past and then the future are the same. You can remember the future. You can actually remember, you can recall that because it's just form. It doesn't have, the only way we get the past and future is things decay. So, it's like a clock. For a long time, we had to just look at the sun coming and going. So we missed the decay part because it just was always coming and going. Does that help? If so, you're welcome. Go ahead, please. Go ahead.
In sitting, sometimes a bell will seem immediate, and sometimes a bell will occur, and then I'll recognize there was a bell. It feels like the bell is far.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I mean by not. When the bell is immediate, it feels not separate, but when it is an echo, it feels far.
Very good.
What is that?
Yeah, they're not two different things. We add on the difference. The self-centered mind, the ego mind, is looking for some kind of variation so that it can get some kind of validation, so that it's someone who can get ahead, someone who can not fall behind, someone who can win, someone who can get some kind of advantage. Materialism, Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism is the book that we study on Tuesdays. And it's just pointing out that you cannot get somewhere. You don't need to get somewhere else. What you're looking for, as I say it, you're looking at your Buddha nature. And it might take a lot of looking at everything that is not that in order to see that the very thing that you thought was not that was your Buddha nature. But it's not about some kind of artificial giving in. It's not about surrendering. All those kind of words they resonate too much with the self-centered mind, the ego mind, and then the ego gets on board, and then that self-centeredness, it thinks that it's going to be included. Like how did Trungpa Rinpoche say it? Ego wants to witness its own funeral. So it can't witness that because it's not that ego dies, it's that it's unreal in the first place. So that's why you don't have to get rid of your ego. Just see that what arises is unreal. It's a very simple situation. What is real is not threatened fundamentally.
When something isn't moving in the senses, where is awareness?
The way you're describing it sounds like it's just still. When something moves, it looks like something's moving, but it's actually the awareness that is congealed into an object, a thought, an emotion, a feeling, a memory, something. When nothing is happening, it's just that. No conclusion, no concluder. It's just open. You could say it was emptiness, but not exactly. Emptiness is more about something that is empty of our imputations or ideas about it. We want to conclude something. We want to make something of something. We want to have some kind of stability. People do it even with meditation. Questions?
This morning we were talking about boundaries. How can we appreciate natural boundaries and see no self?
I think that's the only way you can do it. If you don't see anyone else, then the boundaries are obvious. It's like skin is a boundary, it's obvious. Respecting other people means that you respect their confusion. If someone comes to you and they're confused, you're respectful of that. You don't try to show them how wonderfully enlightened they could be, or correcting them. And if it's a 4-year-old, you take the broken glass away from them. You keep them from running into the road, but you be very, very tentative about any kind of training you give them. Train them as they appear, not as you would like them to be. Just a misunderstanding has strong cultural roots. The best thing my stepfather and my mother ever did for me is leave me alone.
It's what you just described. Learning to move past codependency, rescuing of another, and that is false compassion. You're trying to fix. Well, I do.
I'm listening.
Yeah, that's all. Just you respect boundaries by not trying to fix.
I would do it a little bit differently. I understand what you're saying, and that's accurate in the way you're describing it, but it's more about looking at the self-centeredness, the grasping at someone who knows about that. So it's a grasping that works both ways, this and that. So
that sensation coming in. No.
Not too complicated. Too complicated. I'm not saying that. I'm not disagreeing with you. It's just too complicated. Keep it very simple. Very simple. Just the imputation that there's someone who knows something about someone else. It's really easy to all we're talking about is evaluating and judging people. People who are caught up in their karma, the same as you're caught up in your karma. Cause and effect. I often say, go look in the mirror if you think you have control over this life. Not very much. What you got?
Can you describe the difference between training them as they appear and training them how you would like them to be?
So I would say, rather than set up particular protocols that are based on strong conceptual ideas about the nature of human beings, psychology, and so on, or culture, things that are assumed to be just unimpeachable. I hate to use that word, but to work with the situation as it is, because any being you meet is a combination of an incredible history of causes and conditions that brought about this being, the shape of these ears, the just being a human being. It's unsearchable, and to immediately start laying kind of ideas and opinions and judgments on how it should be so it aligns with the rest of our culture is materialistic, trying to control and manipulate things that helps us feel safer. So I'm not saying that some of that, it's why Buddhism is called the middle way. So not that we shouldn't have some of that, but watch the way we tend to clamp down. As soon as we get a little bit threatened, we start to just buy into the law and the rule. It's called fundamentalism. We don't need it. It's very difficult for even people practicing Buddhism to not be fundamentalists and say, this is what the Buddha said, and didn't say that. only the Theravadins are correct, or only the 18 schools that came out of ancient Buddhist teachings, that those are all at war with each other. Only the Sarvastivadins or the Vaibhashikas or all the other schools. So it's about as much awareness, as much clarity around what is arising, rather than the assumptions about that we add on to or stick the Post-it notes we put on everything. You know, the amazing thing is those Post-it notes may be relatively very, very accurate. They're very accurate, but they end up with some kind of a manipulation that is about results of having well-trained little children, rather than really relating to the fundamental karma that is arising through each person. So a little tight, not too tight, not too loose. More?
How can we work with that fear rather than clamping down on it and going towards rules?
It's just done with awareness. You can actually trust yourself to see when it's time to have rules. This should be done, that shouldn't be done. Don't do that, do this. You could be with yourself and be genuine and see what your motivation is, see what your intention is. Is your intention about being right according to what somebody says is right? Or is your intention about, in your situation, be with all things? If you're with all things, when it's time for you to act on something in a strong, definite way, don't do that. You'll know when to do it, because you've understood who you are in relationship to everyone else. It's called dependent origination. There's no solid separate being anywhere. But it's very, very tempting to go there, and because we want to be right, we don't want to be wrong. Yes.
Deal with them, kids, by their fundamental nature. How do we know that we're seeing their fundamental nature?
Might not. It might be more, kind of unnerving to even be involved in the situation. Might be difficult. What do we ask ourselves? What do we do? I mean, if we're talking about a child is doing this or doing that, what do we do with that? So as long as you can, without putting the child in a dangerous situation, as long as you can, wait, watch. It's called patience. Watch what happens. Put everything on receive. Receive as much as you can what's happening with that person, or with your partner, or with your receive, so that if you do come to some kind of conclusion, that conclusion is choiceless. You can't help but say, yes, that's a burning building. We need to get out of here. Rather than I smell smoke. Let's get out of here. And you find out it's incense. I'm being silly about it. I'm saying, but there are dynamics, and everyone here is an adult. We all know situations where there's been some kind of panic about something, and we start to run to solutions before we really clearly look at the situation. Psychiatry, psychology, philosophy is full of it. Somebody is too smart for their own britches, like Friedrich Hegel. Isn't it Friedrich Hegel? Or is it, no, it's Nietzsche. He was really smart. He had a lot of conclusions. Not wrong. I'm not saying they're incorrect. It's just that they're extremely relative understanding of the nature of this. Keep coming. It's getting exciting. I'm looking for a fight. Yes, I knew I'd get one.
You say operate out of what's showing up, not what you want it to be with children. So a theory in challenging behavior is that it's an adaptive strategy that just no longer works. So when you see, so my question is when it is the goal is actually just for that child to suffer less, and that's where your functioning is coming out of. How does that work with this teaching then?
Well, that's kind of a general. Can you be more specific?
Yeah. Well, for example, a common thing is children push when they're seeking input, but usually they push other kids. So, I can feel that, I can see that. My reference point is, I don't want you to hurt kids because it hurts you too, it hurts everybody. So here's something you can do, push this, push a cart, hold something in your arms. So I'm just curious, is that actually like being with a child? Or is that still operating out of having a reference point of where you want that child to be?
No, that sounds good to me. Yeah, I would say that's a good way of handling. If there's an energy is there, then relate to the energy in a way that pacifies that energy. And have some patience with it to see that each child is some children, I had several of them, so I know about children. And I was a child, because I think everybody else was. So I know what my intense anger was about. And it was, when I say I know what it was about, I know what it was, but I don't know where it came from, why I had it, but it was really intense. And it scared me. It was so intense. So therefore, what you're what you're kind of saying is pacify it, or kind of diffuse it, or at least give it another channel to go through. Totally with that. Unless I'm missing your question, that seems great.
I guess where I'm coming from is, that is responding out of a situation where, this is what you're doing, and here is a reference point is what you could do. And so I don't know how that fits in with your teaching of not wanting them to be anything other than what they are.
Did I say that?
I felt like you did. That's what I understood.
I changed my mind.
So when we're working with adults and we see an energy arise.
You hear what I said? You have no question about what I just said? You're on a track of what you want to say. Go ahead.
I just like that you changed your mind.
Oh,
Glossed over that.
You glossed over it?
Well, because I like it.
Well, okay, good. Then we're friends. What's next?
Well, I'm just curious in the context of adults, where a lot of times I see a similar thing, that they're seeking something.
Yes.
How can I work with, for example, the pattern of the energy is seeking confirmation.
Yes.
How can I work with a person and be with them when I see what they're doing and I have an idea of what else they could do?
Communicate. And the way you would start that is to ask them about it, not an interrogation, but ask them about that in a way that, since you already know the person, a way that would be watching their body language and knowing about body language, which you do, then see if they're ready to receive your question. So you would start by getting them to kind of let you know what's happening with them. In other words, give them your attention. More? Well, that's a good question.
It just seems to be two activities happening, where one there's a low level activity of having an agenda, and there's this other activity of receiving. And so I'm just, it's not clear as to how those two function together in being with all things.
I think the way I'm understanding what you're saying, I think the important thing that needs to be emphasized there is mind training. There was a person who was in that kind of situation that you're describing. There's a powerful, strong wish to be clear and to understand deeply what is happening outside one's opinions, hopes, and fears, and so on. It seems to be necessary to sit down and watch the fear that comes and goes in each individual, and to no longer fight with anything, no longer join anything, and no longer ignore anything. Then that way, in post-meditation, your everyday life, then that kind of generosity, that kind of openness, that kind of, to use that fundamentally operative word there, kindness, is going to be there, rather than some desire to squeeze a particular outcome out of it. Then there's an openness that actually is more, as it says in the Japanese tradition, mind like water. It's more, because the situation is always functioning, there's the mind, the water quality of the mind finds its own level and fills up what needs filling up and flows away from what needs that. So it's situational, not conceptually situational, but fundamentally situational, which goes in a lot of directions other than just the fourth skandha or concept. More?
What's our responsibility when there's a hierarchy of power in the context of I have teachers that I'm working on training? So what is my responsibility then when they pretty much have to listen to what I say?
Sounds good to me. You're the boss. You pay their, I mean, I'm serious. They should, you train them however you see fit.
But I want them to function out of awareness and compassion, not out of just because I said that.
Good luck. I mean, they're not meditators. I mean, I'm not saying they don't meditate because you'd like everybody to sit still for 15, 20 minutes a day, which you may. I don't know. I know you do that somewhat, which I think is a really good idea. But in order to really train the mind takes a lot of work, takes a lifetime. It can't be done in 3 weeks. So, but you could recommend that. You could say, I think it's a good idea for you to do some mind training and then see where they go with that. And you could even set it up in different ways where people spend some time doing that. Am I addressing your question or?
A little bit, I guess, the goal is to be with all things, and it's actually technically working with children is extremely important. And so when, another example is where a parent comes to me and says, help me with this, with my child. It puts me in a position of power where they just listen to me rather than I'm saying, look at your child. And so I don't know what to do in that position of power where they're looking at me as some advice person or some kind of whatever. And I don't know how to support for awareness rather than giving them rules to follow.
Yeah. So I don't mean to be dismissive of what you're saying, but I would say train your mind because I'm not there. I'm listening to you. You're a student of mine. So I'm saying train your mind so that when you meet people, you're meeting them where they're at because each one of these employees has their own boxcars full of karma that is trying to express itself or be subdued or be enhanced by the whatever situations they're running into in terms of dependent origination. Meeting you, meeting a child, it's extremely complicated. So this is why I often say less is better. It's just another way of saying be patient. Just be patient and watch what's moving rather than try to immediately go in and come to conclusions about what's moving and try to control it or get a particular outcome. Even if the agenda might be to try to protect the children or make sure they don't hit other children. We'll give it a little bit of time there. I don't know how you can't really get a situation of being a meditator and working in a situation where you have employees that have no interest. They just want to make a living. They're not interested in training their minds. And then you have all these children where it's complicated, as you heard. And even though we've talked individually about different children and the way they show up, the ones that are really, really challenging, and you've got your work cut out for you. To say it in a literal way. I don't know if it helps any, but I think you're doing fine. If I had some 4-year-olds, I wouldn't hesitate to send them to you or to Shigetsu at all. I have no evaluation of what you're doing. I think you're probably doing the best you can. How do you think?
It's really hard to fail. It's really hard to bear witness to the cycle of suffering.
Yeah. So where's the best place to face that?
Right here?
Yeah. Like looking at the wall, just a way of training the mind. Because if we go out into the world, the desire to fix and to save and to control is so intense. We meet people that are totally difficult or a mess or whatever. And because we can see what it is, there's a tendency to want to control or say or make it to give advice. And I would say, you put it on receive. Just receive the suffering that they're having. That's to have somebody to just listen to them is a lot. Just to listen to people without jumping to a conclusion about how they should be more like you or be different. Challenging. Further questions?
I often tune in at 7 a.m. to the monastery's morning session to get my own meditation session started. Yes. And I listen to the first part of it, and then I turn it off for my meditation session.
Yes.
So my question is the chanting aspects, chanting the sutras. Can you just tell us what the value of that is?
You won't know what the value of it is unless you do it. And the concepts about why you should do it or anything, it sounds too much like an advertisement. So I would say, don't do it. Do something else. But if you think of me as your teacher, which I think you do, you should do it. I had a great deal of difficulty when I first started there. Days, it seems so artificial, so ridiculous. It just seems it's irritating to chant. It's irritating. But if you do it a lot, if you do it through repetition, you realize that that is a way of training yourself to be more clear about just the nature of form, because this is what we're addicted to, form. So this is a way of bringing in formal structure that has to do, in terms of content, has to do with the Buddha Dharma. The sutras, the Heart Sutra, the Diamond Sutra, we're chanting the Daishin Dharani and the Song of the Jewel Mirror Samadhi and so on. The words in there are important, but those are, you can read that. But what's important is to do something repetitive over and over and over and watch how you never can do it the same way twice. Even though if you were very aware of brushing your teeth, you might notice that might be helpful too. But it seems to be necessary to do this with other people and to notice how it's always about awareness. It's about being aware that some people sound better than others. Some people have a better sense of rhythm. Some people, when they do prostrations or something, seem kind of awkward, like I would seem. And some people do things exactly the same. So it's all about awareness of form. And what is form? Form. And what is awareness? Space. And so it's about seeing that and training your mind using those forms in such a way that we begin to have a deeper, more intuitive understanding of what that is. Because the Buddhist teaching is about form as emptiness. Emptiness is form. The same is true of feeling, perception, concept, and consciousness. Until those concepts that I just recited are understood in your bone marrow, you'll keep objecting to some things and agreeing with others. And so this is a way of doing this. That's why not for everyone. I think I've only told one person to come and live at the monastery, and that was Senshu. You there? And that's because she didn't know what to do. I helped her. Did you come here and live? And I'm saying, of course she knew what to do, but I'm saying something about meeting her, I just felt like that would be a good thing for her to do. But most of the people that are there because they see the value of living in an environment where there's a really strong form. Every morning, Han and Bell, we've been doing it for years, and I don't know how many years. How many years have been doing that? Long time. 12 years. So, and it seems to go through changes. So we add things on and take things off, and but it's about training. It's not about believing anything. Nothing to believe. It's about training the awareness that keeps grasping at forms and rejecting forms. Sometimes I'll when I'm in there, and I haven't been in there much lately, probably busy napping or something. If I sit and watch somebody come up and do the doshi form and watch them, even though I see irregularities in everyone, but I may not do much about it. I may just watch that irregularity, because it's about awareness. It's not about right and wrong. So the value is there. I would say in your situation, you could practice it for a couple of weeks, and then go back to the other way you're doing it. The other thing I would recommend, you should come to the monastery and live there for a week or so, and just follow the forms, and there'll be no propaganda to try to get you to continue to do that. It's there. It's available if people want to approach that, and if they don't, they should do whatever they want. There's no more about that.
Well, just the value of being there in person versus doing it by myself in my meditation space would be very different. I'm by myself. And I guess my question is the value greatest to be with others?
I think probably just, we're all here, so it might be a little bit better to be with people, but probably should take advantage of the incredible communication, the internet that we have, to be able to even do such a thing, is make this available people tune into this that are on the other side of the planet. And not a lot of them, but a few. So I would say, leave it up to you. If it helps you, do it. But if you're not interested, don't do it. Do something else. Further questions?
Entitled, the example of the kid pushing on another kid,
Yeah.
and he gives them something else to push on, and you said it was like pacifying. So if you feel your own inner child pushing, is there a way to pacify that?
Yeah, don't do anything with it. And don't refuse the emotion. So don't cover it up with something, ignore it, but just be nice to yourself. Give yourself a break instead of insisting that you don't have that feeling. You're having, if there's some kind of, we call it an inner child, some kind of emotion, be with the emotion as if it's someone else, because it is. It is someone else. If you don't understand, you should ask another question. I'm ready. I can't wait.
So I ask.
Have something?
From Sokuzan.
Sokuzan.
He has two questions. His first one, how is chaos structured?
Because it's, if it's seen for what it is, it's just form. But if it's seen through the eyes of desire, passion, aggression, and ignorance, then I don't like this, but I like that. This should be happening, and that needs to be stopped. It's the very nature of warfare is to object to or agree with anything. I often say, don't go to war, but also don't go to peace. Don't create any kind of polarity. Further question from him?
His other question was, do answers show up for you when you ask, who is this?
I'd be pretty nosy. I really don't ask that because it's obvious. I don't look at something that's black and ask what color it is. So I see it. I see it all the time, and you can see it. Just don't agree with anything. Don't object to anything, and don't ignore anything. These are the three poisons that are talked about in Buddhism. I like it. I don't like it. Who cares? Do nothing. What was this question? Do answers show up?
Do answers show up for you when you ask, who is this?
No, just questions. That's all that shows up all the time. Like what's for supper? Yes, sir.
Hanger steak.
He's being humorous with food. All right. Was that his last question?
Not so far.
Okay, any more questions? Very good, thank you so much.
Actually, that's true. We're going to go to North Peak.
Go to where?
North Peak, if anybody wants to join.
Good.
Right.
And that's hanger steak?
Yeah, there's a hanger steak there.
That's what you had last time.
Was it?
Mhm.
But I like it.
Yeah.
All right,
So we'll stand and dedicate the merit.
good idea. But just like, let me say, just like this forum, it's just a forum. Doesn't mean you've joined anything. It doesn't mean that you've refused anything. It doesn't mean anything's going to happen. Take it away.
May the merit of this penetrate into all places so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Sokuzan Chi Shifu. Shison Musa Boko Sa Boko Ja Oromi. The 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna Paramita. The Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect Sokokoji Buddhist community and the places we practice, our families, friends, and all beings. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light. Gary, what time would you say over at North Peak?